your first-hand account of the visit from which you've just come at Davos. You spoke about this agreement you made with Rabobank, which is the biggest agricultural bank in the world, and BNP Paribas. Can you just give us a little bit of an account of what happened there and how you saw it? Because, like you described, a visit by Trump, 700 people, that was a big thing. But over to you, Erik.
If we look at the big picture of what happened in Davos, Davos, of course, is the prime opportunity for global business leaders and politicians to meet. There are more people there from the West than there are from China and other parts of the world, but it's more and more global venue. I think number one was the visit of Prime Minister Modi of India. For the first time he was there. He made a very passionate speech on climate and in many other ways, and it's a signal of the importance of India. India, as you know, is now the country, or at least of major countries, by far the most rapid economic growth. China is growing close to as fast as India, and of course from a much higher level. But the turnaround in India now is remarkable. And what's very interesting is a turnaround both environment and development at the same time. India is a lead nation of solar energy. Prime Minister Modi is constantly speaking about clean India, how to clean up Ganges, the big river, how to clean up the air, and really turn around India both into environment and development at the same time. Secondly, you mentioned the letter which has been sent out by BlackRock. I think that's BlackRock is the biggest passive investment company in the world, American, and the fact that the top leaders there, which of course been ingrained with American business historically, are now setting out a very, very clear message. Business needs to change. Business cannot go on business as usual as if the environment and social issues of the planet don't exist. Business is there, as you said, with a purpose. And then I was attending another seminar in Singapore a few weeks back where I spoke about this. It was such a resonance from the bankers there. They want a purpose. A bank is investing for a purpose, to make a bridge, railway, housing project, whatever it is, but it's there to serve society. So that, I think, was number two outcome. Three, there was a lot of discussions about some of the very new phenomenon, artificial intelligence, self-driven cars, big data, how these can serve society. I mean, there are dangers. Will there be less or more jobs from this? Can it be used by dictators for evil purposes? So there are negatives and problems. And markets are very much dominated by a few companies like Google and Facebook, so there are concerns. But there are also enormous opportunities in this. I mean, for the environment, I think the opportunities far outweigh the problems. We can get much more efficient, less resource-wasting systems if we turn into these technologies. In China now, they have opened the first bus lanes in the Henan province, which are self-running buses in separate lanes, because we'll see this coming very, very, very fast. Finally, Trump. I think overall there was some relief because at the end he said what people want to hear, that his policy is America first. I think that's fine. Kenyatta should set Kenya first. For sure, if he doesn't do that, we should kick him out. I mean, for sure, the president is there to serve the Kenyan people. So no one has any issue with Trump setting America first. But he said America first does not mean America alone. And that was what had concerned people, that the image that you are just there, not understanding that America also needs friends. They need to work with Africa, with China, India, Europe, and others. So overall, I think while many of the business leaders are concerned with some of the rhetoric, still there was some relief that he said America first, but not America alone.
Erik, I have another question. I think there's been a lot of conversation around carbon trading. So carbon credits, the carbon market. I think here in Kenya we've had a few firms that have come in and talked about opportunities. I'm not sure what really exists, how reasonable this is, and whether it's something that entrepreneurs should look around or look to. So if you could speak to that both in terms of exactly what it is, as well as whether there are actually practical opportunities in Kenya for carbon trading, and what that would mean.
Yeah, I mean, there are at the moment 3 main carbon trading schemes in the world. I mean, the European Union has its scheme. China is establishing a carbon trading scheme this year. It's just in the opening phase. And there is or will be a carbon trading scheme for the American West Coast, states like California, Mexico, and some adjacent states in the United States and in Canada. Because this is also a huge, I mean, California is between, I mean, if it was had been a separate state, it would have been somewhere between the 5th or the 10th biggest economy in the world. So it's massive, even if it's just a few American states. These are the 3 existing carbon trading systems. I think there is full agreement everywhere that the price on carbon is essential, that should be applied by every nation everywhere. But of course, many nations have political difficulties establishing this, mainly because of the fear of unfair competition. But pricing what we do not want, rather than pricing what we do want, many governments are pricing what we do want. They are pricing labor, well, we want people to work more and harder. We are pricing, we have very unfair subsidies for fossil fuels, which we don't want. So we should price what we do not want. And carbon emission is one of those.
Erik, what I wanted to come back to you on is, you know, in terms of Africa, you're talking about this massive opportunity. Can you describe to us examples of countries, besides the tourism one where you touched on, where you're seeing people being really ahead of the curve?
I have to say, I mean, it may not please everyone in Kenya, but I was just in Rwanda. I have to say that what you see there is fairly impressive, and it boils down to top political leadership. Kigali is probably the cleanest city on planet Earth. I'm not just comparing to Nairobi, I can compare to my city Oslo. Kigali is cleaner. It's cleaner than Japan or Switzerland or any other place. That comes from political leadership. Kenya, by the way, is moving in exactly the same direction by this very brave decision to phase out one-use plastic bags. I know the government was struggling, really not knowing whether the people of Kenya would support it. But my impression is that, no, Kenya support it. People are happy. They can find out alternatives. Rwanda is also ahead of many other nations in the world in the sense that there is very limited corruption in the daily life. Everyone told you that you cannot bribe a police officer. If a police officer gives you a fine, well, he will take you to the police station and you will pay the fine and you will get a receipt, and that's it. That's very impressive, and it's well above what is the reality in most nations in the world. And have been able, and Rwanda being landlocked, because after the genocide, which is the most horrendous experience any nation can have, being able to attract business to a landlocked small country in the midst of Africa is a very impressive feat. However, I see a lot of progress now. What Kenyatta announced in his inauguration speech, I think was brave and the right thing to do. He said that now all Africans coming to Kenya will be given a tourist visa, and he said that all East Africans will be treated as Kenyans in Kenya, meaning a Tanzanian or a Rwandan and Ugandan coming here can marry any of you, can get a job here, and that will be decided even if the other countries are not reciprocal doing this. Hopefully, of course, the other nations will do the same, and that's how Europe has also grown, to give these rights to each other. If you make an education in Kenya, it's very negative for trade if you cannot use that education in Uganda or Somalia or Tanzania. Somalian authorities until recently had not accepted Kenyan education in Somalia. All reasons to believe that on average someone educated in Kenya is better educated than someone educated in Somalia. True, the curriculum may be a little bit different, but it's a prohibition to economic growth and development if you cannot have this, that a person educated in one place can get that recognized in another nation. So I think what Kenyatta offered in his inauguration speech was brave, the right thing to do, and set the right tone. But if you ask for an impressive place, I think if you consider the background, Rwanda is very impressive.
Yes, so just, Erica, just reflecting on your, your career and all your experiences, I think one of the things that people often feel about the climate discussion is that it's a very intellectual discussion. It's a discussion that happens in boardrooms. It happens, yes, with BlackRock and companies, but so for a country like Kenya, where a lot of the impact on the environment happens really on the ground, you know, a challenge I think that people throw out to your agency is, how do you make this message relevant to the Mwananchi? How do we move this out of the boardroom, and what are the practicalities that UN Environment can do?
It's an absolute great question. Fortunately, I've asked myself that question basically every day for the last number of years, so I've prepared an answer to it. And this is exactly why we in UN Environment have decided to focus on pollution. Because pollution is much nearer to people. You breathe it, your children get asthma, people get cancer, they get heart attacks. Pollution is now the biggest killer of humanity, not in the distant future. Now, 7 million people are dying prematurely on the planet because of pollution, air pollution, according to the World Health Organization. And if you look to, I mean, the nation where we see the biggest positive change in environment policies now is China, without doubt. President Xi Jinping, in his speech to the Party Congress a few months back, spoke more about environment than about the economy. And it did set out Bloomberg, which is an American company that used to Google to figure out how much, and we spoke for 3.5 hours. So it was not easy to count, but they used Google to count for them, and he spoke more about environment than about the economy. But it did set out 3 main issues for China for the next 5 years: getting every Chinese out of absolute poverty, financial stability for economic growth, and fighting pollution. And of course, when the Chinese state from the center start fighting pollution, it happens at a speed as nowhere else, and that will develop any number of technologies which can be available for Africa and other parts of the world at a low price, which is very good. But it also goes very good for climate, because if you close down a coal power plant, it's good for the local pollution in Beijing as well as good for the climate. So I think we need to avoid this somewhat theoretical conversation about climate into how can we provide jobs from the new green economies, how can we fight pollution, how can we protect the beauty of the land, how can we protect the next generation. I mean, bring it into issues which are closer to people. I had a conversation about this with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which you may know. We were exactly on the same line. He said, if I go to the farmers in Iowa and speak about sea level rise in Florida, they close down their eyes immediately. They're not interested. If I go to the farmer in Iowa and speak about the pollution in Iowa, well, they're interested immediately. So I think this question is great, and we environmentalists have tend to fail in being somewhat too intellectual.
I got a question on social media, which is close to my heart. Somebody was asking, if you look at somewhere like Mombasa, where there's a lot of rubbish, and rubbish, as far as I understand, Sweden is short of rubbish. They're importing it. And they're asking, can UNEP help some of our cities and counties in Kenya to really deal with this issue of rubbish collection, which has now become an eyesore in many places around the country. And then I'll let Erik answer that, and if anyone's got any questions, I'll come to you.
Of course, we are happy to assist. We cannot do beach cleanup in Mombasa. Only people in Mombasa can do beach cleanup in Mombasa. But what we can do is to bring inspirational people who have done this in other parts of the world, look into what is best practice, how we do it in an effective way. Of course, the government of Kenya or the municipality of Mombasa can help. I mean, one of my biggest heroes is an Indian young person called Afroz Shah. He is living in a 10th floor apartment in Mumbai, the biggest city of India, and the shore there is absolutely horrendously polluted, even much more than in Mombasa. One day he decided he had got fucking enough. This must stop. He didn't call the prime minister or some parliamentarian. He just went down to the beach and started cleaning himself with one neighbor. There were 2. The other neighbor was 83. He's now passed away. After some time, there was 10. Then there was 100, then there was thousands, and then something very interesting happened. Then there were thousands of people doing this, because then the politicians came, can we assist? Then business came and said, can we provide maybe some more efficient equipment to you because the machinery will make it easier for you to do it. At the end of the day, Prime Minister Modi himself spoke about Afro Shah as a hero of India, referred to the fact that he had been called champion of the earth, of the UN environment, and told all Indians to follow this example. And when the Prime Minister made a tweet on that, it took a nanosecond before all the chief ministers of the Indian states also started tweeting on the same. So what one person started took really fire all over India.
It's an interesting question, but my more fundamental question is, why do we actually dump garbage in the first place? And I think, we really need to address some of the behavioral issues around climate change, because a lot of this is not driven by, some guy out there that we don't know. The fact is, we create garbage, we create waste, we pollute. And I think we need to have discussions that focus on behavior change and what people need to do, and then equally focus on the cleanup. I think also there's the opportunity for small and medium business, of which I know there are many in the room, to look at really what the business opportunity is in garbage collection, if you must. There's a fantastic firm called EcoPost, run by a young lady called Lorna Ruto and another young gentleman who, went out into Dandora dump site, created employment. So whereas kids went to scavenge for waste, they now are part of a value chain that collects garbage, separates it, takes it into fractions, and then they do very useful things. You can recycle parts, some parts are valuable, etc. I think we have an e-waste management partner over here as well. And so, there's lots of missed business opportunities in managing waste, but I think what we need to focus on is, why do we generate such waste in the first place?
Excellent. Erik, would you like to touch on that, or shall I throw it to...
No, I mean, absolutely agreed. I mean, if there's any amount of new plastic coming in every day, I mean, people will be tired of cleaning beaches, so we need to attack it from that perspective. And the good news is that a number of the big global companies are now doing something. Coca-Cola, which is of course one of the big polluters, announced in Davos a new plastic strategy where they say that by 2030 Coca-Cola will bring in as many plastic bottles as they produce, and it will all be recycled. So there will be a net zero contribution of Coca-Cola to plastic pollution. Danone and Nestlé, two of the biggest companies in the world, just announced that by 2020 their plastic bottles will be 100% made of biodegradable materials, so that it can be thrown out in nature and it will degrade like a potato or an apple. And even they said, this technology we will make available for everyone. So we will not make a company advantage of this. If Tusker want to use it, they will be welcome to use it.
My name is Ojiambo, Deputy Secretary General, Commonwealth, and Kenyan. And as you have heard, Sanda is my baby sister. I want to thank Ali, I want to thank Erik, and also Sanda for very compelling presentations. And I have a few questions, one to each one, and I'll be very quick. First of all, I want to, again, commend Erik on his presentation, but I want to speak a little bit more about education and just ask you to tell us a little more about technical and vocational education. And I really want to commend Kenya for now having a new Minister for Education and also a new Minister, Cabinet Secretary for Youth. And think about how we can make sustainable development goals more accessible to our education system, and not just formal education, but informal education, because we have a youth bulge and many of them are out of school. I want to share a Commonwealth experience in half a minute. We have a Commonwealth curriculum for sustainable development goals that we can implement at early childhood education, high school education, and university. How can we take that even to the private sector so that we're looking at technical and vocational education and the sustainable development goals, which will include environment? One question, a very quick one then to Sanda. Yes, I'll grill you a little bit. On the issue of tourism, Erik has spoken about the linkage between tourism and the environment in certain settings, and I want us to look at the Caribbean and the Pacific, where we've had very adverse weather. And most of the private sector, Richard Branson and the rest, are investing in the Caribbean, rebuilding the infrastructure. But we've forgotten about Africa and desertification and land use, and how we can rebuild infrastructure so that we don't have our youth whose welfares are being destroyed because of the deserts, getting into what I might say radical behavior that doesn't help economies. But I want to ask you a specific question for Safaricom. In the settings of the Caribbean and the Pacific, we've seen debanking of those communities and governments, but we're seeing the growth of a new form of banking. Beyond M-Pesa, people are now using the blockchain. What can we do to bring the blockchain into some of the products that Safaricom is providing for us to regrow our economies? Thank you.
Lots has been said about blockchain, there's lots about cryptocurrencies, etc. And I do believe that with more structure and more clarity, they may make sense in certain areas. So we, for example, in Safaricom, are not there yet. We're examining what may be the pros and the cons, but I think a lot of it also lie around what is the regulatory regime around some of the cryptocurrencies. I know definitely blockchain has distinct advantages for identity management. How do we then use that kind of technology to help, for me, which is my focus, taking the advantage down to the bottom of the pyramid? And I think once we find not blockchain as a standalone, but blockchain as an enabler to deliver on the SDGs, I think we'll have found the perfect solution. So I understand the fascination around the current discourse around what they can do for economic value, but I would be more interested in what blockchain, cryptocurrencies and all that can do to drive and further enhance the delivery of the SDGs, if I was to focus. We're probably not there as a country, but I certainly see it as something in discussion that will progress.
Can I just quickly intervene before I jump to Erik? The Citibank came up with a report last week about blockchain and cryptocurrency, and they were measuring the amount of cryptocurrency held versus the GDP of a country, and Kenya and Nigeria were in the top 5 of that calculation. And what surprised me was that Kenyans are actually holding the equivalent of $1.62 billion in Bitcoin. Now, the interesting question was asked about blockchain. Blockchain and Bitcoin are different things. Bitcoin is one of 1,550 cryptocurrencies. The blockchain is the process around how to make it work. And I think just from my vantage point here, I would like to issue a warning on that holding. I don't see how Bitcoin is going to increase in value from this point in time. I think there's a high risk of it coming down, and we are at risk in this particular situation. I think particularly investors have been evangelical about Bitcoin. There are many other cryptocurrencies. Google was the 19th internet provider. It wasn't the first. Bitcoin was the first. There are other currencies which have a much bigger position. So sorry, I just wanted to add that caveat because that number took me back, $1.62 billion equivalent. Sorry, Erik.
Technology can do a lot to improve education. I mean, in China, for example, where there are many teachers in remote places, and some of them are the first generation teacher in the family. No one has had an education in the family, but they get on the cellular phone an enormous amount of constant information from the minister, from the states, and they can use in their education. Just as an example, because you can open universities where you get the best speakers from universities in the United States of America, but where you supplement with local teachers who can use this in a conversation. It's hard just to follow on the net, but if there is combination of watching the best speakers, but with local teachers, you can do a lot. It's at the end of the day, education is about teachers. Norway is doing much worse than our neighboring nation Finland in education. The results are much better in Finland than in Norway. Why is that? Mainly because in Finland they have made education a prestige occupation. And not necessarily better paid, but it's seen by society as a critical component. While in Norway at the moment, only those go into education who cannot get any other job. You need the best remarks in every subject to be a journalist. If you can just pass the exam, you get into teachers training. That has a negative effect, and we need to really make education a prime idea. Finally, let me give one example of the attitude which we need. I was a few months back sitting beside a member of the government of Vietnam at a dinner. And Vietnam is the #1 nation in the world when it comes to improving education. He told me, he said, my father died in the Vietnam War. My mother had 7 children. She was illiterate. She had a small farm. We ate nothing but rice. Nothing but rice. But she brought 5 out of these 7 children to higher education. because he was so determined to push us into that, because that was what could give us a better life. Then this was at the time when Vietnam was in the Soviet Union. They had a national competition. The 500 best were picked to study in Russia. The 500 next were picked to study in other Eastern European nations. So my friend then went to Sofia in Bulgaria, one-way ticket for 5 years. For 5 years he came back to Vietnam, fully educated, and now a minister. But the spirit of his mother, all focused on how to bring her children forward, because it's what brings a nation forward.
But I find that Kenyan mothers are equally ambitious as that Vietnamese mother you're describing. I must say I found that. I'll come to you in a second. May I go to yourself?
Thank you. My name is Ambassador McKenna. I am the permanent rep to UNEP and UNON. So it's my job to work with Erik and the team to ensure that that complex is strengthened and UNEP is working well, and I intend to do just that. Nice to see you, Justin, who is a former colleague. Now, thank you very much, Erik and Sanda, for that, for what you've given us. But and I agree with you, Erik, that you cannot leapfrog to so far before you get to a certain point. We've done well in certain areas, and we in government know that. But the issue of rubbish, whether it is in opposition strongholds or whether it is in the, it has now become a problem for everyone. Sandra, I think you may, as you said, you've seen an opportunity for the young people to work with, but I think government cannot do everything. I think there's an opportunity also for big business to come up with programs that can help these young people to be able then to come up with small programs that eat into that. I was lucky to have worked in Rwanda, and I know that, yes, I agree with you, Kigali is very clean, but you cannot also develop, I believe you, even on your desk, if it is so cluttered, you cannot really think straight. I think we have to clean Kenya, and we cannot leave it to the government alone and politicians, because politicians also think short term, 5 years. We need long-term strategies. I think big business, the private sector, and the government need to work together to deal with some of these things. Even with Bitcoin and everything and all that, if we still have rubbish like that, if we cannot clean our environment, I think we are in big trouble. So I think that's my comment. And I want to ask you, Erik and Sachu, can you also have something like this about Bitcoin and all those cryptocurrencies and everything that people don't normally understand? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Martin, and I'm in tourism industry, so I understand about rubbish. But my question is actually now to 3 of you, including Madam McKenna. What is Safaricom, UNICEF, UNEP doing about rubbish awareness? Because even if you look around as we sit as Kenyans, we do litter, and it's something like, it's just a norm. It's something I've tried to teach to my daughter, not to litter. And even now, you look, people who have opened up their bottles, they've littered that, So my question, what are we doing for that awareness? Working with the county government, because I feel we should go the old way, whereby we put some small adverts before the prime time news to make Kenyans aware of the way they throw rubbish.
Good afternoon, my name is Jacqueline Onalo. I'm a human rights lawyer, and I also do some international development work in Dandora. This is an observation based on what Sanda said about recycling on Dandora dump site. We have some projects there to provide livelihood security for those who are scavenging on the dump site. But rubbish is big business in Kenya. There are cartels who are working there who are making billions from that rubbish. What is the role of government and the corporate world to deal with this particular menace? It's enough to say that you can have small micro recycling programs that do not provide dignified employment for those who are working on the dump site. So I believe the solution has to come from government and from industry. And I'd like to hear from Safaricom, from government, from the UNEP, to see what the solution is, because it's a big problem, but the problem that it's actually rubbish is a money-making machine. And therefore, though we might have awareness about environmental degradation, the reality is that how do we then measure or balance the two?
I think you're raising an important point, and all of us in Nairobi are certainly experiencing that. We can see the opportunity, but we wonder who's making the money behind it that is preventing it. Your question?
Hi, my name is Andrew Franklin. I work for myself. Over the past years, you may have associated me with security issues, withdrawing from Somalia, building on barriers on the Somalia border, flying for the IABC, so what? All right, I really thought, Eric, that what you said in passing about who is ultimately accountable or responsible for making changes in their own countries, it's you. I've been here for 36 years. I won't be here forever. Maybe not. But by the way, I also come from an era when I joined the Marine Corps. I imagine, I guess we did not bomb Vietnam back into the Stone Age.
Are you getting to a question?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
7 years ago, I called for use of coal in lieu of nuclear energy because we had found coal in Kitui. Mea culpa. Since then, I've seen how the prices of renewables have come down. To put them up. Wind power, solar is the answer, not coal. But the government is going ahead with the Lamu coal project, even though there's no budget to hook that power project up to the national grid. We still have, 7 years ago I said coal instead of nuclear. We have a nuclear energy secretariat going full bore. Reliable, how do we get to reliable and affordable electricity for sustainable economic growth? You know, who speaks for sanity? SGR cannot electrify because of unreliable electricity. So we have this huge project, it's going to be running not on electricity. AGOA, Erik mentioned job creation. We do not grow cotton. We do not build the value chain. Who speaks for this sort of economic development? It's certainly not the political class in Kenya. They are happy with any kind of nice talk, but not good development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Were you prepared to respond? Yeah? Yes. Erik, can you dispense?
No, I think it's much better Cyril responding because he's much more knowledgeable.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Erik, to pass on the floor to me. Good morning, everybody. My name is Siwe. I'm coordinating our intervention in Kenya, coordinating program, what your environment is doing in Kenya. Let me start by the questions on littering and what your environment is doing in particular. You all know that your environment has, let's say, convening power, in that we bring people together. We do not provide leadership. The leadership starts by individuals. You know the stories and cases that both our panelists, Sanda and then Erik, provide. Initiative and sometimes great initiatives start by one. On these pieces especially, what have we been doing? Just last year, we brought together in the campus youth to tell us the way they're seeing waste management, to tell us the way they're seeing the pollution issues. And they agree on a roadmap and a plan of action on how to be part of the solution. Again, this is leadership. We brought in the campus, and thank you again to Ambassador of Kenya to Environment, because it was with her support, we bring first ladies. You know what first lady, or maybe for 3 cases, first men. We brought in the campus to ask them, you are playing a leadership next to your husband. You're most of the time those who inspire governors to really make actions on the ground. Again, leadership. But governors are there also because you decided that they have to lead, they have to act to protect your environment and to also make sure that your children will also have environment which is less polluted. So again, you can be part of the solution. You can work with them to find inclusive solution as you are dealing with your daily issues. And again, we wanted to work more with Kenyans. Your environment is headquartered here. Take that benefits through different partnerships that we're doing. We also discover private sectors in Kenya, which is one of the most prolific and most dynamic in Kenya, isn't it, in the region? And we tell them, as we're doing business, Erik says there is no wrong issues in hearing money while you are doing business. We told them, as we're doing business, how can we partner so that for some of the issues where we can bring some add value, bringing people together to look at a solution, to include youth, to go through clean energy. And this is also something that we are doing quite good with Safaricom. On waste management, for example, Safaricom has a program on waste management, and UN Environment also at a global level. We also have work on waste management. We are working actually with 4 countries: Kilifi. We are starting working with Mombasa, Kisumu, to see how the issues of waste management can be addressed in a very holistic ways. And as you said, and this is to end on this on waste management. Waste management, of course, is a big business. But the question is, how can the policy take into account the need for regulations while considering the employment issues, the green economy issues, the circular economies as we're seeing now, so that they come up with inclusive solutions. The theme for the last Environment Assembly last year, which was headquartered here in Nairobi, discussed the issues of waste, as Erik mentioned again. And one of the main important messages come as, you can be part of the solution. We brought in the companies, more than 50 ONGs companies, to tell us what Kenya is doing. And you would not believe, Kenya is doing fantastic things on combating pollution, using trash, using plastics to generate oil. We even have one of the companies here in Kenya using plastic to produce mineral oil. Can you believe? In Kenya. So, to make it short, leadership is very important. And leadership may be to echo somehow what Ambassador Akira just said. Leadership doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come from the top. At your level, in Kibera, in most of this area where we still have some challenges, we are still facing some challenges, you can do. We have here Grand Generations, company. They are using trash. They have a slogan that I like, from trash to treasure. They collect trash, mainly from the ocean in Kilifi, isn't it? Then to produce, pavement, and this is something that we encourage. So again, let's also, as we are contributing as a citizen, let's also work together. But again, leadership is very important. Hope this helps.
Thank you.
I'll just pull together, I think, the question from the gentleman and the tourism, Jacqueline's question at the back. And I'll divide it into 3. I think from a policy level, we really talked about the importance of leadership. And as I mentioned in my comments, I think for Kenya specifically, and where we are, it's a great time for inflection. Whichever way we decide to industrialize our industry, I think this is a great point to start having that discussion. How do we want to grow as a nation? And much as we have separate cabinet ministries, I really do think that there's need for some coordination that will look at actually what are going to be the outcomes and the impact of all of the big industrial drives, the president's delivery plans, etc. And as I said, look at the positive and the negative externalities. I think that's very important. I think secondly, for manufacturing, a little bit more of a focus on levies on producers and taking producer responsibility. Because a lot of the stuff that is manufactured doesn't necessarily take into consideration the biodegradability of it all. But if a producer then is responsible for that, I think we would then have a whole different set of items that we're struggling with in garbage right now. I think Erik mentioned what Coca-Cola is doing and some of that net zero mitigation stuff. And I do think we need to look at government policy as well as business policy. At a program level, I think that government, business, and perhaps civil society need to sit together and also then understand what is happening. We look at things very much siloed, but at the end of the day, it's the ordinary citizen that suffers. So I think we need to also look at more dialogue so we can look together around waste management. But ultimately, I'll go back again to the Rwanda story. I believe every Saturday, once a month, people get up and clean around their households. So I think we have solutions at the policy level, at the program level, and at the individual level that together may address some of the concerns that we have. It goes back to what I said. I think we need to look very carefully at the things that we don't put a value on and the impact that they have at the end of the day.
Erik, would you like to comment on what was coming out, in particular one about the fact that something like rubbish here in Kenya has some shareholders who have been making probably good money and are not suited to a root and sale transformation? And then I think what Franklin was asking about was, skews in government thinking where, for example, we're considering this coal plant and we've got an endless supply of renewable energy. How does one, is that the job of UNEP to try and insert itself into that argument in order to make governments make more sensible decisions?
Governments make the decisions, not the United Nations. What we can do is to give advice based on what works in other parts of the world. I mean, if something works very well in one country, it tends to be also very helpful in another. For instance, when Kenya embarked upon the ban on plastics, Judy Wakongo, the then environment minister, and so she's now the ambassador to France, but she asked her, can you help? What we then did was basically to bring people from Rwanda and other places who have done well on this to give advice as to what they have done. I mean, true, Kenya is bigger than Rwanda, more complicated than Rwanda, but still it's helpful to get that information. This is what we can work on, and that also applies to your question about coal. We advise against embarking upon coal, and we can provide any amount of information as to how we can move rapidly into more solar, more wind, etc.
I'd like to thank my guests, but give them an opportunity for some closing remarks as we wind up today's very, very interesting session. There are a lot of people in the room. If you're passionate about this subject, you're the country manager, are you not, for Kenya? In the front row, we've got folks from UNEP as well. So just please interact at the end of this session if this is an area that you're particularly keen on. What I'm hearing is that there is an enormous business opportunity that's staring us in the face, and both Sanda and Erik are telling us that, and sometimes we're not seeing it for what it is, and I think that I'm grateful that you've taken the scales off our eyes in that respect. Sanda, can I leave you to make some comments, and then Erik to finish up?
Thank you. I'll just probably speak from a private sector perspective. I do think, and as was reflected in Davos, I think the new leadership around a lot of socioeconomic and even political issues is actually really coming from the private sector. And I think it's really incumbent on all of us to really look at the role of business as being bigger than just purely manufacturing or providing services. I think any business leader needs to really be cognizant about their role and their impact in society, because ultimately business cannot succeed if society is failing. I do believe there's a place for philanthropy, and a lot of businesses will do that. I just do think that the time has come for business to step up and do business differently. And those would be my closing remarks.
Thank you.
No, I mean, Safaricom is obviously a fantastic asset to Kenya, a company Kenyans can be very proud of, and also look into how there can be more Safaricoms in Kenya and in the world. The Kenyan ban on plastics has taken, there's a lot of interest abroad, so while Kenya may have learned from Rwanda, now I can tell you, I mean, there will be a lot of interest in other parts of the world to learn from the Kenyan experience. What have been the problems in this plastic ban? What has been the successes? And others will learn from that. People are very impressed. So take pride in these successes and build upon them, and see the business opportunities in environment. Environment is any problem is much more likely to be resolved if there's a business opportunity. And we spoke about waste. Nearly all forms of waste is also a resource which can be used for something else, and the more it can be turned into a business opportunity, the better it is. And I've lined up here renewable energy, tourism, industry, agriculture, technology. There are so many enormous business opportunities in getting environment right, and then you will have the double purpose. You provide jobs, make a good business, and make life better for Kenyans and for the world at the same time. So it's a fantastic ambition. Just finally say, if you have ideas you want to share with me, I will not be able to give you all my card, but it's very easy to send me an email, Erik, but with K, not with C, Erik.Solheim, we will get it in the paper so that you don't know to remember the right spelling, @un.org. I may not be able to answer all the emails myself, but then I will channel them to Cyril and other people working on the specific issue of your interest. And of course, if we can provide support to environment-friendly business, we'll be very happy to do it.
I and Sanda would like to thank you for making time to come and speak to us today and partner with us. We really appreciate the conversation, the freshness of it, the wide-ranging nature of it, your ability to pluck examples from Madagascar to Vietnam, and to put us in that whole continuum and help us understand where we are. And you can count on our support going forward, whether it's your MOU with Safaracom, whether it's me. We really appreciate your enthusiasm, your straightforwardness, and your passion for your subject, because nothing is achieved without being passionate. Like that young man you described in India, we see you too as that similar young man who was passionate about what he did. Thank you so much.